All right. Well, welcome to another episode of DiaSoren live at ADLM. In today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit to two experts in market access, and we're going to discuss how the evolving reimbursement landscape, emerging policy trends, are impacting customers and laboratories throughout the U.S. So I am joined here today by Stephanie Ibbotson, Senior Director of Market Access, and Bridget Parsons, Senior Manager of Market Access here at DiaSoren. Welcome.
Thanks, Chad.
Before we kick off, I think it'd be a good thing to start off with maybe just describe a little bit about your guys' roles here at DiaSoren and how you're supporting laboratories and customers throughout the U.S.
Sure. I think we can break that down into two categories. So the first one being policy and the second one being reimbursement. I think everybody's more focused on the second part, but policy really does drive reimbursement. So as a team at Luminex and DiaSoren, we offer services about policy review in the landscape, as well as we will do financial calculators and budget impact models for laboratories who are bringing on a new technology, especially in things like syndromic testing, which can be confusing to laboratories. We're happy to come in and help work with you to understand what policies will drive your reimbursement coverage. And as well, we'll help work with your billing teams to get tests set up and whatnot to try to make it easier to understand the reimbursement landscape. And I will preface all of this too by saying that this is the DiaSoren perspective of policy and reimbursement. It is up to laboratories to make their own determination before making decisions, but we're happy to help guide you.
Yeah, absolutely. Giving labs the tools to understand and strategize around what is sometimes an evolving reimbursement and coverage landscape is really, I think, where we spend most of our time.
Absolutely. So I think just to kick things off, I think we do a little bit higher level to start, right? So can you guys, just from your conversations and what you're seeing out there, describe a little bit about the current reimbursement environment here in the U.S., especially around molecular diagnostics, and maybe how that's playing a role in patient access?
Sure, I'll kick off and then Bridget, you can add in too. So I think what laboratories are seeing specifically in molecular diagnostics right now is a lot of constraint from payers, right? Post-COVID, we're seeing payers more involved in infectious diseases than we ever did before. This is really clear in the syndromic space, so respiratory and GI testing. Blood culture, not so much because it's mostly in the DRG, but we're seeing payer controls like prior authorization and things like that a lot more than we ever did. And it can be very difficult for laboratories because if you don't understand the full impact of the cost, it's not just about how much do you pay for the test. It's what do you need to provide this service to your entire population that can be very confusing. And we try to help clear up that picture as much as we can. I mean, it's not the most transparent field right now. Bridget, you have thoughts?
Absolutely. I think the reimbursement landscape is getting increasingly complex and increasingly evidence-driven. So it's not enough for a payer might used to say, does the test do what it says it does? And that is not anywhere near enough anymore. It has to improve patient care. It has to save costs. It has to change something about that care pathway meaningfully to be covered. And if a test isn't covered, it doesn't matter how cool it is. It could be the most cutting-edge scientific breakthrough, but it just doesn't matter, right? Patients can't access it if labs can't sustainably offer it and patients can't get the test.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
Absolutely. And I heard one of the things you just said was evolving, right? And honestly, at ADLM, that's been a hot topic throughout pretty much the course of every conversation I know I've been a part of with you, especially Steph. So when you look at the reimbursement and policy and the continuation of this evolution, both across public, private payers, what are some of the more significant trends you guys are seeing that are maybe impacting customers today, but also could be impacting customers down the road?
I think the question I get asked about the most is PAMA, right? The Protecting Access to Medicare Act that was passed in 2016, and what is going to happen with that going forward? Are we going to see another round of cuts? We're currently in a reporting phase, and so theoretically we'll have a cutting phase next year. However, it's been paused a few years in a row since 2020. Thankfully, labs had other things on their minds rather than reporting data. Just something
Like
small.
what?
I don't know. I think there was a global pandemic.
It's this little
maybe.
global pandemic thing, I think.
Have you heard of COVID?
Familiar, actually.
Oh, okay. I was just making sure.
Yeah.
But no, I think PAMA really has impacted the ability for laboratories to be able to operate and provide testing to everybody that they need to. And so there's an uncertain future with PAMA, and then the Results Act, which theoretically will replace PAMA and fix some of the issues. And so we anticipate that to pass in the coming months. However, nothing is guaranteed, and we still have some hurdles in the political world to get through, like the midterms. That will take up a lot of oxygen. So we'll hopefully see the results passage later this year, and then PAMA will no longer be a factor. I think all labs would be very happy if we could say that. So we'll see. We'll keep it monitoring, but at the end of the day, that's what I get asked about the most. And I think the second one, and then I'll let you weigh in, is what's the future of Medicaid? Right? So we're seeing some constraints in Medicaid, even though only 4% of the budget of CMS is about diagnostics. It tends to be the place where cuts happen. And so we see restriction in testing. And the Medicaid population with the Big Beautiful Bill Act, that could be a place where we see constraint. And laboratories have to prepare for that because it changes the types of testing that they will do and the volume. So they have to flex just as much as companies like we do to be able to prepare for any changes like this.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the trend we're seeing in response to that uncertainty and the continued scrutiny and legislation and initiatives from CMS is just people are being more strategic, and they're looking more toward targeted testing or flexible testing so that they can be really well positioned if and when things change again, right? Like nobody can predict the future, but you can at least do what you can to position yourself so that you can at least respond when changes do come.
Well, that makes sense. And I think, touching on that thing, I know when you guys are having conversations with different laboratories throughout the country, you're interacting with a wide net of people, right? Mm-hmm. From different roles and things like that in the laboratory. So as you're talking to these folks, how are changing coverage and payment policies impacting lab operations? How's it impacting financial planning? How's it impacting patient access, right? The accessibility of getting this type of testing done when needed.
Yeah, I think you're right. We do talk to a lot of different facility types and people of different backgrounds, majority the lab. But it's actually been very interesting. I would say in the last 8 or 9 years, it's shifted where previously the lab didn't think about coverage or policy. That was a financial issue. Laboratory just worked at making sure that they had the best tests and that they were providing the service they were asked to do. Now they're being asked to also be business managers. They're not just laboratorians anymore. They're also managing the lab like a business. And so while they operate all very differently, there are some similarities. I mean, staffing is critical. So when your volumes shift, how are you going to keep up with that? Coverage is a laboratory issue because you may want to offer the next greatest test, but there is no framework to cover innovation, right? There's a time lag always with that. So laboratorians sometimes have to compromise and say, okay, we're going to offer this service at a cost because there is no framework for us to get paid. And they have to make that decision from a business case as well as from the clinical case. And I think that is unfortunately consistent across every population that we talk to in the laboratories, whether it's a commercial laboratory or a small hospital in rural Iowa. I'm just picking that off the top of my head. They're facing the same problems today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're stuck in a hard place, really. Labs in any of those situations, they're really almost always between a clinical need, right, from a physician or a client or whoever has the patient in front of them that needs something very specific. But then they're also essentially having to balance the financial side because the people over there in rev cycle or whatever it might be are coming to them saying like, hey, we have this problem, we're not getting paid or whatever, we're getting denied for all these tests and we're losing money on it. And then they're just in the middle of this trying to, they have to meet both needs, right? Mm-hmm. They have to figure out a solution, and it's a really hard place to be. It's really challenging.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, and it brings up a point too, because you think about it, you mentioned how much it's changed, right? It's not just looking for the best tests or anything, or what do we need? It's, you mentioned perfectly, they're operating like a business now, mm-hmm. right? And that's a lot of different change in thinking processes and stakeholders that are having to get involved with that. So, obviously it's the current state of where we're at. When you look at the next several years, where we're headed, where we're going, what changes do you think or you believe will have the greatest impact on reimbursement and policy? Are there things our laboratories could be doing differently, or anything they would have to think through in that end?
And I think this ties in with your last question, but in my opinion, diagnostic stewardship. Right now, payers are looking at the laboratory as only a cost, and that the laboratorians need to be ratcheted back, and they need utilization control, so you can only get this test once every 3 months or whatever. But as labs evolve in the stewardship space and they really take control of the quantity and quality of their testing, not that they're not doing that already, but proving it on the payer space, which I think labs are becoming more capable of doing, I think payers will then realize that they don't know what's best in some cases more than others, right? So the lab can continue to own that stewardship factor, because stewardship in the diagnostic space is being driven by laboratories, right? It's not being driven by a regulatory framework. Labs are taking this on because they know they want to be better and they want to find the right test for each patient. And once payers realize that the laboratory is the expert, I think we'll see some change. That may be a bit more optimistic than your take.
No, I think you're giving the payers a lot of credit, as we should, to our payer colleagues who are listening. No, I was going to say the same thing. I think we're going to see the whole market, right, continue moving toward everything being value-based, including diagnostics, and a focus on evidence. And if it doesn't, if you don't have the evidence to provide to show the utility of the test or how it's making a difference, it's going to be a very challenging situation to get it
Agreed.
to patients.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think you're spot on. I mean, over the past few years especially too, the concept of diagnostic stewardship seems to be everywhere, right? Every topic, every presentation, every webinar I'm joining or seeing, it's really about that. And I feel like labs are learning and growing with this mindset, because they're all looking, and I see it more and more in conversations I'm having every day, right? How clinically meaningful is this test? We don't want to just run and deploy out a bunch of different tests, hoping to find something. What's going to create an impact? What's going to create a change? And we're seeing that more and more. I mean, that's been almost every conversation I'm having here at ADLM. And it's exciting time, but it's going to be a big change. And glad that there's people like you guys that can help them navigate that portion of it. So, talking a little bit, we've spent a lot of time focused in on really what the market looks like, what are impacting different laboratories. From your kind of perspective, how does DiaSorin help our customers navigate these increasingly complex reimbursement environments?
One thing we try to do is provide clarity, right? We want to be as transparent as possible in a space that is relatively opaque. What is your coverage policy of your largest payer? What does it actually cover? How do you find that policy? Where do you go? And how do you understand what that means? Because laboratories generally don't know where to start, and they don't really have payer contacts. It's not like you can pick up the phone and call somebody at whatever payer that you bill to and say, hey, what patients do I run this on? They don't have the access. Whereas our team, we can go in and we can show them, okay, this is where you find your coverage document. This is how you translate that into laboratory terms. And we help them find the way and see the through line to make sure that when they choose to bring on a new panel, like say a syndromic panel, which I think everybody who could ever possibly listen to this podcast understands the reimbursement landscape of a syndromic panel or has lived through it in some way, it can be very difficult. And there's lots of different options. Bridget touched on it before, where people are going towards targeted testing or flexible testing because payers aren't often covering syndromic all in one test. But how do you translate that into, okay, well, if I'm flexible or I offer flexible testing, how do I do that in a way that serves the patient while also meeting the payer controls?
Yeah, we really want to be a strategic partner. And actually, like for real, I tell people this like on calls every single day. Like my goal is not that you get this product, yours, and now you sit it down in your lab, you're excited, it's shiny, it's new, and then I'm like, see ya, good luck. Like we want them to feel confident in the technology they adopt, but also the reimbursement strategy behind it, and feel like they have a support system for that, because it is really difficult. It's difficult, if not impossible, to be an expert on every payer policy and every coverage change and every coding, all the ins and outs of coding, and they need someone that they can go to, and we really want to be that for them.
Yeah. And we like to say that we're partners beyond the platform. We're not just there for somebody to buy a liaison plex. We want to make sure that when you buy the liaison plex, you can use it effectively.
No, that makes sense. And we see it in real world scenarios almost every day, right? And he's mentioned these lab directors, different roles and places are learning in real time of these changes, and just the guidance and support you can provide, I think, helps them, right? This is a new environment for them just as much as it is for us. And learning how to, balance the business operation side with the laboratory stewardship component can be incredibly difficult. So when you think through a little bit about, looking at that component, if you had to give one piece of advice or guidance, we'll say maybe, to these lab leaders who are making these decisions and thinking through it, is there any guidance you can provide on maybe one or two things you think that they can start doing today to help better prepare them for tomorrow?
I've gone first for all the other questions,
Oh,
so
of
I think
course.
we should go to Bridget.
Was that the hard one that you're like,
Sorry.
I think I would just encourage them to, as much as possible, think about how they can move away from one-size-fits-all testing. How can you be a little more strategic, a little more tailored to the patient or the place of service or whatever it might be, because I think that is the direction we will all eventually be forced to move, whether we want to or not. And I think that those who do move away from that one-size-fits-all mentality will be the best position to meet whatever, future coverage and reimbursement challenges the payer landscape throws at them.
Mm-hmm. And I think, following on to what Bridget said, what advice I would give to people is take a breath. Reimbursement can be difficult, challenging, and scary. I mean, not to use a too emotional word, but especially for lab leaders who haven't had to work with it before, or this is new on their plate because they've been promoted or whatever. There are resources that are very easy for laboratories to access to understand these questions. We're happy to take calls from anybody any day to talk about, okay, what does this mean? I know what a CPT code is, but what is a Z code? How do I use it? What is the point? We're happy to walk people through that because we do this every day. They run labs every day. We can't run a lab, so we'll help you with your reimbursement.
I love it. So, Bridget, you mentioned one-size-fits-all panels. I think we know where that was going. But I think the question I have for you is, as we introduce this new concept to syndromic testing, right? Flex testing, customization. What do you think has been the biggest challenge to maybe adjust the mindset of the laboratorians and people you're working with to really think through this process and how to really operationalize it and bring it to life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the biggest pushback we get, at least that I get when I talk to customers about offering essentially fewer targets, right? The number is smaller than 22 or 24 or whatever. If you're starting with a smaller panel, is getting physicians on board with doing a more staged approach to testing when they're used to getting every single answer the first time. And so I think to that, the strongest, the best way we have to address that is with data, right? So having customers, even, without talking to us, anybody could do this, right? Look at your positivity across the last 6 months, across the last year for, say, your respiratory testing. And what did you see? Did you see a, subset of your pathogens that you're testing for make up 90% of your testing? Like, it's likely that you needed that full panel very few numbers of times. And I think that can be a really powerful place to start because it's your own institutional data. You can take that to the physicians or whoever might be worried about missing positives. And at least start the conversation about, like, maybe we could scale this back a little bit for some patients.
Right, and flex doesn't have to be all flex all the time. That's the beauty of it. It is flexible, right? And what I see from customers when I talk to them is generally, okay, I like the idea, but where do I even start? Well, like Bridget said, they already have their data. Yes, we have tools that can crunch the data and help show them what are the 5 panels that would address your population or whatnot. But there is nothing magic about flex. It's really just driven by logic. And sometimes it takes people like us that come in very pragmatically and just say, hey, so-and-so down the street has done it this way. Would that work for you? No. Okay, what would? And we can just play around and look at the different options. And at the end of the day, every hospital or every laboratory has a medical committee that is going to weigh in on these. So there is no one person making the decision. And we'll help you get past that blank page state and find the panels that will fit.
No, love it. And, I'll be honest, you said flex testing isn't magic. I was about to interrupt you, but I think you nailed it because I think differently. But,
It's magical,
yeah,
but it's not
yeah,
magic.
but what you finished with is logic, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's the thing we hear all the time too of we are offering all these different solutions, right? Through the lens of respiratory. We got a syndromic panel, we got a targeted test here, we got a quadplex, and oftentimes they'll see multiple orders of duplication, right? Covering the same targets on the same tests and really trying to gauge like what's real, what do we need to do here? So when you're going through these conversations with customers, you were mentioning, obviously a business operations side now, managing a lab and all these different things. Time is very valuable, right? It's one resource that I think we all wish we had more of. So do you have any recommendations to when you guys are preparing to meet with a potential laboratory or customer on these questions, anything they can do to better prepare to engage with you guys?
One thing that we're asking a lot of is, what are your demographics of your patients? Do you have a very high Medicare, or are you a Medicaid, depending on where you are within a city or a rural setting? But if you want to come to a conversation with Bridget or I or part of the market access team, it always helps to know who are your major payers. We don't need to know percentages, but do you bill to Blue Cross Blue Shield or United? Because if we're going to show you your policy, let's show you one that's relevant,
Sure.
right? And so if you can come armed with that data, it helps. But we can work without that as well. We can wait till you hear and show you to the policy that way, or discuss general policies that could affect your area. But I think far and wide, labs have their data, and they're willing to share, and that's really what we need is just their data.
Yeah, their data. I know. Sometimes I feel like I ask for a lot from people, but I also always want to know where their tests are coming from. That's really helpful. Like where in the institution, if it's coming from a clinic versus an ED, like that's going to have a huge impact on coverage. If a huge percentage is inpatient, they're not going to get reimbursed for that at all. And just understanding where that testing is coming from will also be a very helpful piece of data.
Mm-hmm.
So have you noticed in your conversations then, obviously, you were tying in, there needs to be this, clinical story attached to the economic value, if it makes sense or not. So have you seen any instances, maybe success stories of customers adopting something like flex testing that maybe makes testing more accessible and done the right way?
Yeah, definitely. There's been a few cases where we've had facilities who reduce the ability of physicians to order a syndromic panel in the outpatient because they were not having coverage, and so the hospital made a decision financially to allow syndromic panels only in the inpatient space. By switching to flex testing on Liaison Plex, they were able to create test order sets, so panels specific to different places that would order. So clinicians in an outpatient clinic would get access to some tests. The ED would have access to other ones based on the types of patients that they need, or maybe season with respiratory. And they were able to offer syndromic panels in the outpatient space, which met a clinical need that they were missing, but it didn't come at the sacrifice of the financial value, right? So there was no compromise between clinical and financial. Because I think at the end of the day, we all know that the very top thing that we have to meet is clinical, right? It doesn't matter if you make money on a test if it provides bad results or nothing helpful to doctors. It has to make that clinical picture more clear. But it shouldn't, or ideally it wouldn't also cost an arm and a leg.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally.
Yeah. I mean, we see it over and over again, right? It becoming a, please, God, don't order this respiratory panel unless you absolutely need it. Like doing everything possible, like doctors have to go through pop-up after pop-up to even order the test, to it becoming a tool they can actually use in multiple ways for multiple types of patients. And it's not, like this thing that it's like, oh, if you have to have it, I guess you can order it, but like, please don't unless you absolutely need to. It becomes a tool they can actually use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, spot on. I mean, that's the whole piece of this thing that I think always is very impactful is they are looking for ways. They want these types of tests accessible to clinicians, right, to better treat their patients, make more informed decision-making processes. And I think it's a very exciting time to be able to bring and marry those two together with something like flex testing and some of the other projects we've been working on here. So I know we're getting close on time, so I really appreciate you guys both jumping into this podcast booth here. But any final words of wisdom you think we haven't gotten to, or something you want our laboratories and customers to hear about, maybe how they could be working with you more, and ways that you guys maybe can support them to achieve their goals?
Yeah, I think that's a good ending question. What I'd like laboratories to know, not just our customers, you have resources at your fingertips. I mean, talk to your salespeople. Every manufacturing company has some form of market access or resources that you can talk to. We are more than happy to talk to people. This is what we're here for. We're here to help you. And literally, this is all we do. So we know a lot, and we don't expect you guys to know, and we're happy to help on this new journey, or if you just have simple questions. We don't get enough of that, I don't think. People wait until they have an issue and then they go, oh, okay, I'll call market access because they think they're wasting our time. No, I love to have the policy conversation every day. And if I'm not talking to customers, I'm forcing Bridget to listen to it, or Chad here. And so I think you guys would appreciate if customers called more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've known you for a long time, known Bridget for a long time, and I think you provide immense value just from an educational. It's not, like you said, you're not in it to be like you have to come to DiaSorin. You're just there to educate and give guidance and ideas and address their concerns. And I think you guys play a massive role in that.
Thank you.
And we're nerds, so we legitimately enjoy it. Call us.
We love policy. And so, I mean, maybe we shouldn't say this, but if you do call us, we're going to talk to you a lot.
Yeah.
Like, you're probably going to want to hang up.
We don't want to dissuade people.
Like, no, let's talk about the CLFS a little bit more. Or
But have you considered?
No, but it's great. We're happy to be here. And it's one of the luxuries of not being part of the commercial team as well. We just get to tell it like it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're not biased.
Well, I'm really glad you both are nerds in that regard and like talking about it because, yeah.
Somebody has to be.
Somebody has to be, I guess. So, well, with that, Bridget, Steph, thank you so much for joining this podcast here today. I was very excited to have you. So thank you so much for joining. And I think that's it for this episode of Live at ADLM.
Thanks, Chad.
Thanks.